Just when Monique thought she had finally escaped the past, it came pounding at her new door, with a custody petition in one hand and vengeance in the other. Her ex-husband wants back what he lost, not out of love, but out of spite. With lies in court and danger outside it, Monique must fight again, not just for custody of her daughter, but for the peace she's finally found. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The metal door groaned as it creaked open, rusted from years of weather and neglect. Victor Cooper stepped inside the dimly lit apartment, flicking the light switch with an impatient snap of his fingers. Nothing. The electricity had long been cut. The air was stale, heavy with dust and silence. Monique and Sophie were gone. Gone. He stood in the doorway, a man drenched in sweat and rage. The collar of his leather jacket flipped up against his neck like a choke chain. He scanned the empty living room, peeling paint, bare walls, broken blinds. Nothing of hers remained. No crayon drawings on the fridge. No half-used bottles of lavender shampoo in the bathroom. No scent of floor polish lingering in the air. She had scrubbed herself out of this place completely. Victor clenched his fists. She hadn't just left. She had escaped. He stepped further into the room, his boots echoing hollowly on the wooden floor. His gaze dropped to the scuff marks near the corner where Sophie's old bookshelf used to be. He remembered the nights he'd yelled so loud the neighbors threatened to call the cops. He remembered Monique, standing in that corner, shielding Sophie with her own body, like a mother wolf guarding her cub. At the time, he had felt powerful. Now he just felt erased. He pulled out his phone and opened the article again. Billionaire CEO Damian Cole pays legal fees in custody battle for former employee Monique Johnson. Her name in bold letters. His name completely absent. He scrolled past the picture, Monique, smiling softly outside a courthouse, with that smug son of a bitch standing beside her in a navy suit, hand resting just behind her back like she belonged to him. Like she wasn't Victor's wife. Like Sophie wasn't Victor's daughter. He slammed the phone onto the countertop, hard enough that the screen cracked. Monique had signed the divorce paper without hesitation. She hadn't begged him. She hadn't just left him, she'd strategized. Planned her exit like a soldier. And now, she was tucked safely away in a luxury apartment, supported by a billionaire who probably bought her a new bed, a new wardrobe, a new identity. But she had made a mistake. She had taken Sophie with her. Victor began pacing. Every step scraped against the floor like a warning. He hadn't seen Sophie in months. Not in person. He'd tried, of course, calling, texting, even showing up at her old school. But Monique had blocked his number, changed her email, moved without leaving a trail. There were rumors that Cole's private security team was involved. Watching, tracking, protecting. He spat on the floor. It wasn't about love. Not really. Not anymore. It was about control. He lit a cigarette and stared out the window at the city blinking below. He could feel the distance between him and them. A skyscraper's worth of distance. And money. And power. But Victor knew something about survival too. He hadn't grown up with wealth. He'd learned to fight in courtrooms and in alleyways. If Monique thought a divorce and a new address could keep her safe, she was wrong. Very wrong. He took another long drag and exhaled slowly. Fine, he muttered, voice gravelly with venom. You want to fight, Monique? I'll give you one. His eyes flicked down to the papers in his bag. The custody petition he had filled out the night before. His lawyer had been reluctant, warning him it was a long shot. But Victor knew how to play dirty. Knew how to lie with a straight face. He didn't need truth. He needed doubt. Just enough to poison the water. She's mentally unstable, he whispered to himself, rehearsing the words. Overworked. Under pressure. Exposing my daughter to a strange man. Using her for attention. It's not safe. He repeated it again and again, until it sounded like gospel. Then he smiled slowly, thinly. If he couldn't have Monique, he'd take her child. The envelope arrived on a Monday. It was thick, official, and cream-colored. Too heavy to be junk, too quiet to be harmless. It slid through the mail slot with a whisper, landing on the hardwood floor of Monique's new apartment like a hidden bomb. She was folding laundry in the living room when she heard it. At first, she didn't think anything of it. She went to retrieve it casually, a soft towel draped over one arm. But the moment she saw the legal seal in the upper left corner, her heart stopped. Her fingers trembled as she opened the envelope. She unfolded the pages slowly, as if delaying the inevitable would make it easier. Then her eyes locked on the header. Petition for full legal custody, filed by Victor Cooper. Her knees nearly gave way. She dropped the towel and sat on the edge of the couch. The words blurred as her breath caught in her throat. Her eyes scanned the contents. Victor was claiming she was mentally unstable, that she was unfit to care for Sophie, that she was exposing their daughter to a volatile and inappropriate environment. Her mouth went dry. She flipped through page after page, feeling her pulse pound like a war drum in her ears. And then she saw it, her relationship with Damien, twisted and painted like a scandal. Victor had framed it as reckless, as manipulative. He was accusing her of using Sophie to secure financial gain from Damien, claiming it compromised the emotional safety of the child. She read it again and again, each time more absurd than the last, but no less terrifying. The door opened behind her. "Monique!" Damien's voice. She didn't answer. Damien walked in carrying a grocery bag, setting it down before turning to her. "Hey, what's wrong?" She didn't speak, just held the papers up with both hands. He took them, eyes scanning fast, jaw tightening as he read. By the time he reached the last page, the air between them had thickened. "He's trying to bury you," Damien said finally. "He's going to use everything he can." "I thought it was over," Monique whispered. "The divorce, the custody battle. I thought he was done." Damien crouched in front of her, placing his hands gently on her knees. "Men like him don't care about peace. They care about control." Monique wiped at her face. She hadn't realized she was crying. "He's using our relationship against me. He's saying I'm unstable, that I'm a danger to Sophie." Damien's eyes softened, but his voice stayed firm. "He has no case. We'll destroy this in court." Monique let out a hollow laugh. "I can't go through this again. I barely survived it last time." Damien leaned in closer. "You're not alone this time." The next morning, Damien made a call. The same attorney who'd helped Monique through her divorce, Naomi Wells, answered with crisp professionalism. She was sharp, efficient, and unshakable. She reviewed the petition and immediately recognized Victor's tactics. "This is a classic smear campaign," Naomi said, scrolling through the digital documents Damien had sent her. "He doesn't have evidence. He has narrative. But if the wrong judge believes the story, we could still have a problem." "Then we give them a better one," Damien said. "Truth." Naomi nodded. "We'll counterfile. Character witnesses, school records, medical reports, work history. And we'll file a motion to suppress the unfounded mental health claims. If he pushes it, he'll need a formal evaluation, and he won't pass one himself." "What about me?" Damien asked. Naomi paused. "He's targeting your involvement directly. You could be seen as a liability or an advantage." "Make me an advantage," he said. "Put me on the witness list." The court date came faster than expected. The waiting room outside the family courtroom was heavy with tension. Monique sat with Naomi on one side, dressed simply in navy blue, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Damien sat beside her, calm but coiled. Across from them, Victor paced like a predator in an ill-fitting suit, jaw clenched, nostrils flaring. His lawyer, a smug-looking man named Pierce, adjusted his tie and whispered instructions. When Victor saw Damien, his eyes narrowed into slits. "Funny," he muttered loud enough to be heard. "The billionaire savior shows up. What's next? You gonna adopt my kid too?" Damien didn't rise to the bait. He simply stood, adjusted his cuffs, and met Victor's gaze. "She deserves a father," Damien said coolly. "Not a threat." Victor stepped forward, his voice low and venomous. "I'm going to rip her away from both of you. Naomi stood immediately, blocking his path. Take one more step, and I'll have you cited for harassment before we even enter the courtroom. Victor smirked. You think you've won? You have no idea who I am. Monique rose, her voice clear. I do. That's why I left. The bailiff called their case. Court was in session. The courtroom was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums beneath the skin. Even the air felt tense, thick with restrained emotions, memories no one could speak of, and lies waiting to be tested. Monique sat at the petitioner's table, her back straight, her heart pounding. Her hands rested on the edge of the polished oak, cold to the touch. Her lawyer, Naomi, was poised beside her. Folders spread like armor across the desk. Damien sat directly behind her, silent and immovable, a presence of calm steel. His gaze never wavered from her. Across the aisle, Victor sat in his pressed suit, tapping his foot with impatient confidence. His lawyer, Mr. Pierce, leaned over occasionally to whisper strategy. Victor never looked at Monique. Not once. But his eyes flicked to Sophie's name every time it was spoken aloud. The judge, a stern woman in her early 60s named Honorable Judge Rosalind Graves, scanned the file before her with a penetrating gaze. Mr. Cooper, she said finally, you are requesting full legal and physical custody of your daughter, Sophie Cooper. On what grounds? Victor stood. My ex-wife, he began, has demonstrated emotional instability and mental fragility since our separation. She collapsed in her home, in front of our daughter. She's since moved in with a man who, while wealthy, is unrelated to her and not fit to be a co-parent. I am concerned for my daughter's emotional well-being. There was a slight scoff from the gallery. Damien didn't move. Naomi stood. Objection, Your Honor. Statement of opinion, not evidence. Sustained, the judge said sharply. Mr. Cooper, present your facts, not feelings. Victor nodded stiffly. My daughter has been taken from me. I was denied visitation for months. Her mother has kept her hidden, moved without notice. I have no idea what kind of environment she's being raised in. Naomi stood again, calm and composed. If I may, Your Honor, we'd like to enter into evidence our response file, which includes medical records, psychological evaluations, employment documentation, and a full log of all communication attempts between the parties since the divorce. Ms. Johnson has not hidden. She relocated for safety. At no point did Mr. Cooper file for visitation until now, and when he did, he followed it with a surprise custody petition. Judge Graves glanced through the folder Naomi handed over. She read silently, page by page, her expression unreadable. Monique Johnson, the judge said. Please take the stand. Monique stood and walked forward. She did not tremble. Not this time. Not now. She was sworn in, and Naomi began. Monique, how would you describe your relationship with your daughter? She's my heart, Monique said, voice even. My reason for breathing. I've sacrificed everything for her. My education, my health, my time. So she could have stability. Love. Safety. Did you collapse in front of your daughter? Monique nodded. Yes. From exhaustion. I was working 3 jobs to afford legal fees and housing after my separation. But I got up. And I got help. And what is your current situation? I have 1 full-time job as an office manager. I'm pursuing my writing again. And I live in a stable home with Sophie. She's thriving. I attend every school meeting. I take her to therapy, ballet, tutoring. Naomi paused, then looked toward the defense table. Have you ever withheld your daughter from Mr. Cooper? Monique hesitated. I refused contact after he began threatening me. Verbally. On the phone. Outside my building. He yelled in front of Sophie. She had nightmares. My attorney advised I document everything and request supervised visits, which he declined. Naomi stepped back. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Pierce rose for cross-examination. Monique, he said slowly, with a smirk that made her stomach twist. Is it true you're romantically involved with Mr. Damien Cole, Billionaire CEO? Monique lifted her chin. Yes. And is he Sophie's father? No. But he lives with you. He provides financial support. Would you call that blurring the lines? Naomi objected. Overruled, Judge Graves said. Answer the question, Ms. Johnson. Monique's voice was steady. He is not a father by biology, but he is one by choice. He shows up. He protects her. He listens. Something Sophie never had before. The courtroom stilled. Victor shifted uncomfortably. Pierce leaned in. And isn't it true you collapsed under pressure and were hospitalized? I did, she said. And I recovered. Because I asked for help. That's not instability. That's strength. An hour later, Damien took the stand. He sat like a pillar, composed, unshaken even under Pierce's sharpest questions. You're not married to Ms. Johnson, Pierce snapped. Why insert yourself into a custody dispute that has nothing to do with you? Because I care about both of them, Damien replied. Because I've seen the kind of man Victor is. And because Sophie deserves better than threats and manipulation. Wouldn't you agree that a man of your status could be intimidating to the court, using your influence to sway outcomes? Damien leaned in slightly. Money can't buy a child's trust. I had to earn that, with bedtime stories and piano recitals and holding her hand when she was afraid. That's not influence. That's commitment. Even the judge didn't hide the shift in her eyes. When Victor took the stand, the courtroom mood turned sharp. He began arrogantly, but under Naomi's cross-examination, his story began to unravel. Phone records showed aggressive voicemails, texts with threats, surveillance from school property during unauthorized visits. His claims of concern turned into patterns of control. And when Naomi calmly slid a printed photo across the table, Victor yelling in the school parking lot, face twisted in anger, with Sophie crying in the background, the room seemed to hold its breath. Judge Graves finally spoke. I've heard enough. Court is adjourned for the day. We will reconvene for judgment on Friday morning. As the gavel struck, Monique exhaled for the first time in hours. Outside the courtroom, Victor stormed past them without a word. Damien reached for Monique's hand. She didn't let go. The morning sun stretched across Monique's apartment, warm and golden, but it didn't feel safe. Not today. Not when the judgment hearing was just 2 days away. Not when Victor had gone silent. Monique stood by the window with a steaming mug of coffee she hadn't touched. She watched Sophie play on the rug with her crayons, humming a tune she made up as she colored a picture of a house with flowers and a tall figure holding her hand. In the corner of the page, Monique noticed a smaller man with an angry red face and arms crossed. She tried not to let it shake her. But it did. That afternoon, Monique kept her promise to herself. She took Sophie to school, kissed her forehead, and reminded her, I'll be right here when you get out. Then she drove straight to the precinct to file an official restraining order request against Victor. The school had already been warned. Damien's security detail had increased patrols. But none of it had settled her heart. Not completely. Damien met her outside the precinct. You okay? He asked, reaching for her hand. No, she admitted. But I will be. He kissed her knuckles, right there on the sidewalk, like it was the most natural thing in the world. 3 hours later, her phone rang. She was preparing pasta for dinner. Damien had gone to take a call in the other room. She glanced at the screen. Private number. Something in her gut turned. She answered cautiously. Hello. There was silence. Then breathing. And then his voice. I warned you. Her hand froze midair. Her throat dried. I warned you, Victor repeated. But you kept pushing. You kept him around. You lied to my daughter. You lied to the court. And now you're going to pay. Her chest tightened. Victor, don't you dare. I already did, he hissed. She's with me now. The line went dead. The phone slipped from her fingers, crashing against the kitchen tile. The next 10 minutes were a blur. Damien was already in the room, phone in hand, shouting to security. Get eyes on every exit. Check the school. Tell me how he got in. Monique's mind screamed, not again. Not now. Not my baby. She and Damien rushed to the school, tires squealing, horns honking behind them. When they arrived, the principal was already outside, pale, frantic. He showed up with an old ID badge. The security guard didn't question it. He He said it was urgent. He said you had an accident. I'm so sorry, Ms. Johnson, I thought. Damien didn't wait for the rest. He was on the phone again, barking commands, tracing license plates, vehicle makes, possible routes. Monique sat on the curb, unable to move. Her heart was no longer in her chest. It was out there, with Sophie, somewhere on the road, possibly in danger. I can't do this, she whispered, rocking slowly. I can't lose her. Damien crouched beside her, gripping her shoulders. We're going to find her. I swear to you, Monique, we will bring her home. The search lasted 2 agonizing days. An Amber Alert spread like wildfire. Damien's security team coordinated with local and federal law enforcement. Cameras tracked Victor's car crossing state lines. He was heading south fast, avoiding toll roads and gas stations with cameras. It was clear he had a plan, or at least he thought he did. On the morning of the 3rd day, a quiet tip came in. A gas station clerk in Asheville, North Carolina, recognized Victor's face from the alert. He had paid in cash, rushed Edgy. The clerk noticed Sophie in the back seat, silent and scared. License plate confirmed. Motel confirmed. Within an hour, police descended on a cheap roadside inn just off the highway. Victor tried to run. He didn't get far. He was tackled to the pavement, screaming that Monique had turned his daughter against him, that he deserved to be in her life. Inside, Sophie was found, frightened, tear-streaked, but safe, clutching the Little Prince book Damien had given her. When the officer brought her outside, she scanned the crowd, eyes wide and frantic. Monique, she cried. Mommy. Monique broke through the line of officers and pulled her into her arms, sobbing so hard she couldn't speak. Damien arrived seconds later, wrapping them both in his arms. For the first time in his life, his wealth meant nothing. His power, his name, his status, none of it mattered. Only this. Only them. Only her. Victor was taken into custody, face bruised and bloodied from his attempted escape. He had no words when they cuffed him. Only rage. Only failure. Monique watched from behind the squad car, Sophie pressed against her chest. You don't get to hurt us anymore, she whispered. And he was gone. The courtroom had changed. It felt heavier now. Not because of the marble walls or the polished wood, but because of what had been endured. What had nearly been lost. Monique sat beside Naomi in the front row, her hand clasping Damien's tightly beneath the table. She had not slept much. Sophie, though safe at home under guarded care, had woken twice in the night calling out for her mother. Monique had held her through both, rocking her back to peace, whispering over and over again, "You're safe. He can't get to you anymore." Now, Judge Graves sat tall on the bench, her face carved from granite. She held the final ruling in one hand, the other resting lightly atop her gavel. The courtroom was full. Press had been kept out by request, but word of the kidnapping had leaked. Whispers filled the back rows. Court clerks, off-duty officers, even teachers from Sophie's school gathered quietly in support. Victor was brought in last. Shackled but still cocky. Dressed in an ill-fitting suit borrowed from a legal aid center, his lip bruised from the arrest, his eyes bloodshot but defiant. He sat down beside his public defender, the original attorney having dropped his case the day after the kidnapping. The bailiff called the room to order. All rise for the Honorable Judge Rosalind Graves. Everyone stood. Monique's breath hitched. Then they sat. Judge Graves adjusted her glasses, flipping a page before setting it down. Her voice was clear, unflinching. This court has reviewed the entirety of both filings, heard extensive testimony from the parties involved, as well as character witnesses, legal guardians, and law enforcement. She looked up. Mr. Cooper, you filed for full custody under the claim that Ms. Johnson was mentally unfit, emotionally unstable, and that her relationship with a non-biological guardian was inappropriate. Victor straightened slightly, like he still believed in his own delusion. But you failed to present credible evidence of instability, the judge continued. You failed to follow standard visitation requests. You failed to behave responsibly during legal proceedings. And then you committed an egregious act, removing the child without consent across state lines and attempting to flee the country. This act was not only illegal, it was dangerous, traumatizing, and deeply revealing of your character. Victor looked away, jaw tightening. Judge Graves turned to Monique. Ms. Johnson, this court recognizes your commitment as a mother. Your tireless efforts to provide, protect, and nurture your daughter, even under extreme emotional and financial pressure, are not just commendable. They are inspiring. Monique blinked quickly to clear her tears. The judge's eyes shifted to Damien. Mr. Cole, this court acknowledges your involvement, though you are not a legal guardian. Your conduct has been examined, and it is evident that your presence in Sophie's life has been stabilizing, positive, and without coercion or intent to replace a parent. This court sees you as a support figure, not a disruptor. Damien gave a small, respectful nod. Judge Graves picked up the final ruling and tapped it once on the desk. Effective immediately, full legal and physical custody of Sophie Cooper is granted solely to Monique Johnson. Mr. Victor Cooper's parental rights are suspended indefinitely, with no scheduled visitation. Any future appeals will require psychiatric evaluation, court-monitored therapy, and clear evidence of rehabilitation. The gavel came down hard. Court is adjourned. There was no applause, no eruption of celebration, just a deep, soul-rattling exhale from Monique. She lowered her head, her shoulders finally collapsing inward as if a decade of weight had slipped free. Damien stood and pulled her into his arms before she could fall apart. She wept quietly against his chest. Not because she was broken, but because she was whole again. Naomi stepped back to give them a moment. Across the courtroom, Victor was escorted out in cuffs. He didn't turn around. He didn't get to. Outside, the air was brisk but clean. The sky was clear blue, no clouds, no noise. Just the buzz of a city that no longer seemed like a threat. Monique stepped into the sunlight like it was something she'd earned. Damien walked beside her, his hand never leaving hers. Naomi joined them, her briefcase slung over one shoulder. "You did it," she said simply. Monique turned to her. "No, we did." Naomi smiled and nodded. "Take her home. And Monique, let her see you breathe now. Let her see that it's finally safe." That night, Monique tucked Sophie into bed and kissed her forehead as always. "Mama?" the little girl asked sleepily. "Is he gone forever?" Monique brushed her fingers through Sophie's hair. "He's gone. And you're safe. You're so safe, mi amor." Sophie smiled drowsily. "Okay, can I dream about the wedding now?" Monique blinked. "What wedding?" "Yours and Mr. Damien," Sophie whispered with a sleepy grin. "He told me he bought a ring." Monique's heart skipped. She looked toward the doorway, where Damien stood, leaning quietly against the frame. Their eyes met. He didn't say a word, but Monique didn't need him to. Not tonight. The gardens were quiet, the kind of quiet that made you notice things. How petals curled inward in the early morning chill, how bees whispered between blossoms, how wind moved like breath through leaves. The New York Botanical Garden wasn't Monique's usual place. It was where she used to dream she'd go one day, when life slowed down, when pain let up, when hope finally felt safe again. Now it was real. She stood at the heart of the rose garden, her fingers grazing the delicate edges of a deep red bloom. Her hair was down, loose around her shoulders. The sun painted gold in her curls. Sophie was somewhere nearby with a camera around her neck, running between flower beds like a little explorer. Her laughter floated through the trees. Monique turned as she heard footsteps approaching on the gravel path. Damien. He wore no suit today. Just a soft gray sweater, dark jeans, and that half-smile he reserved only for her. In his hand, he held a small, velvet-covered box. Her heart stuttered. "I know we were supposed to have lunch at the cafe," he said, voice warm. "But I thought this might be better." He looked around. "You once told me you wanted to get married under roses." "I told you that?" she asked, voice caught between disbelief and breathless knowing. "You said it once. You didn't think I was listening." She smiled faintly. "You always listen." He took her hands in his, their fingers naturally intertwining. He looked down for a moment, as if gathering everything he had ever felt into one sentence. "When I met you, I thought I was helping you. I thought you needed me. But the truth is, he paused, I was the one falling apart. Quietly. Efficiently. Silently. I just didn't know it yet. He dropped to one knee in the soft gravel, gently. Monique's breath hitched. You taught me how to feel again. How to forgive. How to love. You gave me a life I didn't even know I was missing. And you gave Sophie a father, even when I was too afraid to ask if I could be one. He opened the box. Inside was a ring unlike anything mass-produced. A delicate band, shaped like intertwining vines, wrapped around a single pear-shaped diamond nestled between two tiny gold roses. Elegant. Timeless. Hers. Monique Johnson, he said, voice low and steady. Will you marry me? The world around them seemed to pause. No wind, no birds, just the sound of her heart colliding with everything it had ever hoped for. She sank to her knees in front of him, hands over her mouth. Yes, she whispered. Then louder. Yes. Yes, Damien. He laughed, a rare, unguarded sound, before she threw her arms around him and kissed him deeply, right there between the roses. Sophie came running from the side path, camera swinging from her neck. Wait, did he do it? Did he ask? Monique turned, tears in her eyes. Yes, baby. He did. And did you say yes? She did, Damien confirmed, rising as he pulled Monique to her feet beside him. Sophie hooped, then raised her camera. Okay, don't move. I'm taking the first picture of Mommy and Mr. Damien as fiancés. The shutter clicked. Once. Twice. Wait, Sophie said, frowning. You're not going to have a boring wedding, right? Monique laughed, hugging her daughter tightly. No, Princessa. It'll be the biggest, most beautiful one you've ever seen. And can I have a sparkly dress too? Damien smirked. You'll have two. The following weeks were a dream spun into motion. The guest list grew quickly. Family. Friends. The attorney who'd fought beside them. Teachers who helped Sophie during the hard months. Even some of Monique's old co-workers from the hotel and the cleaning agency she'd once worked for. No one was left behind. Monique picked a date in early spring, the season of blooming, of second chances, of beginnings that came after long winters. Damien called in a team of planners, but let Monique design every piece. The dress was soft ivory, with lace sleeves and a long train. Her bouquet would be wildflowers and garden roses. The venue, a sunlit greenhouse strung with lights and music, surrounded by the same roses where he'd knelt. Every detail felt like a reclamation. Every detail whispered, you made it through. Now you live. The spring morning dawned like a blessing. The sun rose over the city not in haste, but in slow golden waves, kissing the windows of every brownstone and skyscraper alike. Birds flitted over the trees in Central Park, and for once the wind in New York felt soft, gentle, as if it too was celebrating. Inside the grand greenhouse venue at the edge of the city, roses bloomed in full blush. Vines of jasmine curled up the glass walls, and strings of fairy lights floated overhead like stars that had come down to rest for the day. The scent of blossoms mingled with candle wax and anticipation. Today was their wedding day. In the bridal suite, Monique stood barefoot before a tall mirror, her fingers gently smoothing down the front of her gown. It was simple, elegant, ivory satin that caught the light, with soft lace that wrapped delicately over her shoulders and down her back. Her curls fell freely, threaded with small gold pins that glinted like sunlight. There was a knock. Sophie poked her head in, grinning from ear to ear. Can I come in? Or is this a royal dressing chamber? Monique turned, laughing through tears already welling in her eyes. Come here, mi reina. Sophie ran in, her little champagne-colored dress puffing around her knees. Her hair had been done in curls, with a silk flower crown perched perfectly on her head. In her hand, she carried a small, folded piece of paper. I wrote something, she said shyly. For you and Mr. Damien. Can I read it at the wedding? Monique knelt, tears slipping down her cheeks. Yes, sweetheart. 1,000 times yes. You're not crying because you're sad, right? No, baby. I'm crying because this is everything I never thought I'd have. And now I do. Because of you. Sophie hugged her mother tightly. And Mr. Damien. He helped too. Monique laughed softly. Yes, he really, really did. Outside, Damien stood at the altar in a deep charcoal suit. His boutonniere was a single ivory rose, picked by Sophie that morning from their window box garden. He stood tall, but his fingers twitched slightly as he waited. It wasn't nerves. It was disbelief. That this was real. That she was really about to become his wife. The guests stood as music filled the space, strings and piano in a slow, swelling harmony. Rows of friends, family, and former strangers rose to their feet, turning toward the center aisle. There she was. Monique appeared, framed by the greenhouse doors, walking down the aisle as if she were gliding, carried not by her feet, but by purpose. A lifetime of pain, endurance, and quiet strength seemed to trail behind her like a second veil. Damien couldn't breathe. She reached him, eyes locked on his, and everything else fell away. The ceremony was soft, intimate, every word sacred. When the officiant turned to Sophie, inviting her to read her note, she stepped forward with the seriousness of royalty. I didn't know what family really meant before, she read, her voice small but steady. I thought it just meant people you're born with. But now I know it means people who show up. People who stay. Mommy always stayed. And Mr. Damien showed up. And now we're all staying. Forever. The guests sniffled, wiping their eyes. Damien reached out and lifted Sophie into his arms, holding her between them as the vows began. Monique spoke first. I thought I was broken when you found me, she said, eyes glistening. But you didn't fix me. You just stood beside me while I healed. And then you let me love you in my own time. That kind of patience is the purest love I've ever known. Damien's voice trembled as he took her hands. You showed me that power doesn't come from what you build outside. It comes from what you choose to carry day after day. You carried the world for your daughter. Now let me carry it for you. As your partner. As your protector. As your home. There wasn't a dry eye in the room when the officiant finally declared, by the vows spoken and the love witnessed here today, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Damien kissed her with both hands on her face, as if she were something sacred. And she kissed him back like she finally believed in fairy tales again. Sophie jumped up and down beside them. Now we all have the same last name. The reception that followed was nothing short of magical. Twinkling lights glowed above the dance floor, where people from every corner of their lives gathered. Damien's executives and Monique's former co-workers, teachers, neighbors, even Naomi, who raised her glass and toasted, to battles fought and hearts claimed. Damien danced with Sophie under the stars, spinning her in circles until she squealed. Monique watched from the edge, hands clasped over her chest. Later, he pulled her into his arms for their first dance as husband and wife. The music was slow, tender. She laid her head on his shoulder and whispered, I never thought I'd belong to anyone again. Damien kissed her forehead. You don't belong to me, Monique. You belong with me. As the night faded into candles and soft laughter, and the city glittered in the distance, Monique stood with Damien and Sophie by the edge of the garden. No more battles. No more fear. Just a family, formed not by chance but by choice. A new name. A new life. A future they had earned, together. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.